Yes. Two.
Donnie, so we got all kinds of
Good.
ID.
Henry, Ken and Cynthia's in. All right, so we do that now, right? Ken and Cynthia.
And, okay,
Abbott is not in yet, so it's just Ken and Cynthia. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. We'll call the Park Authority meeting of March 8th, 2023 to order. My name is Chairman Kyle Stone, and I already said that. Virginia law authorizes the remote participation of board members, provided that a policy exists to ensure that such remote participation is consistently administered. This board has approved policy 111. Any such remote attendance must be approved by the board as long as a physical quorum of the board is actually present. Voice of the remote participant is available to be heard by everyone in the room, and the remote participation comports with the policy. And we are going to verify that the remote participant's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for the meeting room, and confirmation of their location. We've got 3 members who will be joining us remotely tonight, 2 of which are on, and we will read them in. So starting with Dr. Carter, are you connected to this meeting remotely?
Yes, I am. I am participating from my home in Franconia District.
Thank you. I would move that Dr. Carter's voice may be adequately heard in this location.
Second.
Do we have all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. And then moving on to Ken. Mr. Quincy, are you connected to this meeting remotely?
Yes, I am. Ken Quincy, I'm excuse me, participating from my residence in the Providence District, along with the flu.
Thank you, Ken. I move that Mr. Quincy's voice may be adequately heard in this location.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, verification that the remote participants' physical, blah, blah, blah. All right, pursuant to the Park Authority's policy, those were notes for me. I didn't need to read that. That's like an Anchorman moment. Pursuant to the.
You'll get it. You'll get it. You'll get it. There's.
Oh, okay. All right. We'll wait for Abuna.
I'm here.
All right. Dr. Adu Houghton, are you connected to this meeting remotely?
Yes, hi, Abna Adu Houghton. I'm joining from my residence in Franconia District.
Great, thank you. I move that Dr. Adu Houghton's voice may be adequately heard in this location.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that carries. All right, pursuant to Park Authority's policy 111 for remote participation in public meetings, I move that Dr. Cynthia Jacobs Carter and shouldn't it have all 3 names? Yeah. Dr. Cynthia Jacobs Carter and Mr. Ken Quincy be permitted to participate remotely in this meeting because it comports with the policy we adopted. And also Dr. Abuna Adu Houghton, and a physical quorum is present here at the Park Authority Boardroom, 9th floor, Harity Building. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we can now get started. Ken, the floor is yours.
Ken Quincy, I'll call the Planning and Development Committee to order. We have 2 action items. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hannafin's team. Somebody?
They're coming up to their chairs, Ken.
Oh, okay.
Evening, Melissa Emery, Special Projects Branch Manager in P&D, sending the scope for the Lake Fairfax Park Bird property demolition. We're looking to get approval to demolish the residential and ancillary structures out at the bird property. We acquired this parcel back in 2014 and consists of 3 houses and 4 ancillary structures that will all come down completely, and then we'll grade, seed, and straw. These houses are in disrepair, the subject of community complaints, and really they just need to go. So the cost is estimated to be $295,000. Looking for scope to be completed this quarter, permit in the second quarter, and then be done with construction by the end of the year. And we don't anticipate that this will create any additional revenue and no increase in annual maintenance costs. Any questions?
Questions and comments? So we'll start with the Hunter Mill District Rep.
Do it.
Do it. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, Ken, Tim Hackman. Do
Yeah.
we have, is there any plans for any long-term use of this property? Will just be returned to a natural state?
So this part of this project will just grade out into a natural state. I am not up to date on the master plan and what long-term
I'm
development.
assuming the master plan would have to be amended in any event
Yeah.
to use this.
It has it has the potential to be a second entrance into the park
That's what I was thinking.
at some point in the future.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Consensus to move this forward?
Yes.
Okay,
Very much.
next item. Audrey Moore Rec Center.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Michael Peter here. I am, of course, the Administration Division Director, and I'm here to talk a little bit about something that we are moving forward with. Usually I wouldn't be here as part of planning and development, but we have initiated a series of facility visits and reviews to really take a look at all of our buildings, but starting with the rec centers from top to bottom, to figure out what do we need to do to be able to make sure we can make it comfortably and efficiently to when we get to the renovation time for our different buildings, so we don't encounter situations like we did at Mount Vernon. So working closely with our asset management branch, which is in the administration division, working with Park Services Division under Cindy Walsh, working with planning and development under Brendan Hannafin, we have identified a series of projects that need to be completed at Audrey Moore. These projects will be completed so we can be, again, operational, efficient, and comfortable at Audrey Moore. And all of these projects are anticipated to be incorporated into the new design because what we're focusing on are existing systems that are not projected necessarily to be completely changed with the new upgrades. So what we have available right now, if you remember, we had identified $16 million from the Audrey Moore bond in the 2020 issuance that we would have focused and put into Mount Vernon. With the ARPA money, we will be getting that back, which means for Audrey Moore design, permitting, and the issues that we're talking about here, there's approximately $21 million available. What we're requesting tonight is to be able to move forward with $3 million worth of these building health upgrades. And we've given you a little bit of a summary of what we're talking about here. There certainly are some facade issues, some amenity issues. We will be upgrading HVAC systems and controls, dealing with some chlorination issues in the pool. And as a result of both our bond planning and what the community has been focused on, we'll also be replacing the kiln in the ceramics area. So any questions?
Questions, comments? We'll start with the Franconia District Rep.
No comments.
Audrey Moore's in Braddock, but we can start with Franconia if there's
sorry.
any questions there.
I apologize. I apologize.
I'm just to be exceptionally redundant. The money we're taking out of the bond allotment for this project doesn't impact the design and scoping of the project, and will still be on schedule. It doesn't adjust anything.
That is correct. This is to make sure we can get through to that time with systems that are 45 years old.
Perfect. That's it. Thanks, Ken.
Any other
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, Ken, Mike Thompson has a question.
Yes, Mike.
Several years ago, pre-COVID, we had a consultant come in and look at all the rec centers, make recommendations to us that I think at the time in those dollars was $200 million maybe of work that had to be done to the rec centers. I would have assumed, since those were all things that were necessary to keep them profitable, and the recommendation was do these all as quickly as possible. Don't wait until however many years based on whichever one to move quickly. I would have assumed a lot of these kinds of things would have been part of what they looked at. if it sounds like with what you're going in, you're finding things that weren't necessarily part of what they considered. So when we go through this process, are we going to come back and then say what was a $200 million project that may now be in today's dollars with inflation and project cost $280 million for whatever it is? Are we going to say, wait, we also have on top of that a whole series of things that we have to do like this in all these rec centers on top of that amount of money? I'm just
Most-
trying to understand.
Most of those items that you're talking about from, I think it was 2018, when that was done, those have been incorporated into the projected scope of the renovation cycle. So what we're doing here is addressing some of those issues. Also, we've gotten a little bit more detailed looking inside condenser coils and things like that. So we're accomplishing some of these things early so we can stay operational and then finish the rest of it when, for instance, if we get to Audrey Moore, if that's what the board decides to do with the 26 bond, then shovel in the ground in 27, we're implementing the rest of all of that.
No, I appreciate that, except that the consultant's conclusion, which at the time the staff agreed with and that this board accepted as a relevant thing was communicated to board of supervisors, said that we couldn't wait until the renovation time of every rec center if we were going to be net positive. It showed diminishing returns and drop offs and everything else. So what you just said sounded to me like we've decided to put that aside, not look at that, not try and do those renovations, go just with the standard renovation timelines. I'm just trying to understand how this all works together and hope that it does all work together.
Right. So, if the study had been funded as recommended, we would be in a much different situation than we are today.
Right.
And so what we're doing now is trying to keep the centers operational so we don't run into an issue like we had at Mount Vernon when half the systems are on, flatbeds outside of the center. And so what we're doing here, what we probably will bring to you soon with Lee District is what we need to do to keep systems operational, to make sure that the roof isn't caving in on those facilities until we're able to do a larger renovation.
So this is above and beyond what we thought before. This is the minimum, this is, for lack of a better way to say,
I would say the numbers that we had before are completely blown out of the water now.
well, I agree. But
Right,
I mean, I'm
so-
saying, put aside the numbers, which are going to be much higher nowadays. The type of work that had to be done that was outlined theoretically still has to be done. This is above and beyond anything that was in that, but this is also the stuff that is necessary to keep the place running.
Yes.
It wouldn't be above and beyond. It's assumed you're gonna put new systems in if you're doing a major renovation to a rec center, as they are doing at Mount Vernon. So, I mean, if you think about it theoretically, this is going to be something that doesn't have to be done in the renovation now, provided they aren't worn out by the time we
No.
do the renovation.
So,
I know,
so
but I'm
just
talking
to
about the plan, not
clarify,
necessarily the specific.
the Brailford study that was done really focused on what expansions or what we needed to do with renovations to keep the system sustainable. The needs assessment a couple years prior to that was the condition assessment of all of the facilities. And so those two things combined told us what we need for each of the facilities. And so we are really addressing the condition assessment.
So
that
these
was
are,
done.
these are two separate tracks that will both need to be done, but it's one doesn't wipe out the need for the other.
That's absolutely correct. And what we're attempting to do is go above and beyond what the county has made available with sinking fund, what we have available with net revenue of, between those things, maybe $5 to $7 million a year, and identifying in concrete terms what exactly needs to be done. So we have quotes, we know exactly how we can move forward to get things in shape so they can at least last until the renovation and continue beyond that. A little bit better Band-Aid.
Other questions?
So all of the rec centers are on this plan for modifications and or upgrades outside of the report where we talked about which facilities were which were winners, which were losers, which we might close and which we needed new. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we still need a new rec center in order to save ourselves and rest.
I thought,
We've heard that.
Our
I think
biggest
Cindy-
market, our biggest market.
Other
and I think Cindy was trying to say something.
The projects we were talking about, they were on the assessment, Sarah. So all of those things, the air handling units, all the things that are starting to break down, they were handled their life cycle. And the building is 1971, so a lot of these systems are original facilities. So those are things that are not over and above, those are the things that should have been done.
Right, no, I guess. But if they had been identified the first wave through as needing to be replaced, well, but if they were identified as being need to be replaced the first wave through, we shouldn't have to be going through and looking, we should only be looking for new things that might have been missed last time, because we'd already have a list of things that have to be.
So it's a validation.
now.
I mean, that study was done 5 years ago.
No,
That
and
means
looking
it's
for the
that was
change.
done in
I just said, looking for
So,
the change
yeah.
between.
Yeah.
Again, what I've heard, what I understand is we have one track of keeping them up and running. We have another track of the things that we're gonna have to do if we want to keep this as a revenue generating thing, which we are directed to do. And even if we move away from it, it has to generate revenue. It has to be competitive to make people want to come there. And that was the whole point of the, so I was just trying to, I want all the plans to work together and not be independent of each other.
Yes, so do we, but it really boils down to funding. We did a beautiful renovation at Spring Hill, but we have systems there that are failing, infrastructure that's failing. So it's also, what can we fit in that scope? And so then we're dealing with it with sinking fund and other funds, separate from that.
Other questions? Is there consensus to move this forward?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There are no other issues to come before the committee, and we will hereby adjourn the Planning and Development Committee.
Until we do this.
All right.
Not 3 million. I totally disconnect that.
Linwood, you're up.
This is Linwood Gorham. I'd like to bring the Park Operations Committee to order. And we just have one item tonight that's kind of a comeback, a bring back from last meeting. And I'd like to turn it over to Kim Eckert, the Park Operations Division Director.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Eckert. I'm the Division Director for the Park Operations Division, as Linwood mentions. I'm here tonight to reintroduce the proposed renaming of Franconia District Park to Grove Point Park. At the February 22nd Park Operations Committee meeting, the committee requested staff to confirm Supervisor Lust's approval and return to the committee once that had been obtained. At this time, I'm pleased to report that the staff has been able to confirm Supervisor Lust's approval of renaming Franconia District Park to Grove Point Park. As you will see, Allison's displaying a mock-up of the sign if approved. Be happy to answer any questions.
Cynthia, you're good with this, right?
Yes, I am now.
All right. And unlike Ken, I'm gonna do my meeting within the allotted amount of time.
Yeah, let me ask a
And as
question.
for as for us, a consensus to
I
move
got that
this
right?
forward.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Anybody else have any other issues for the Park Operations Committee? Seeing none, I adjourn the Park Operations Committee. Thank you very much, Kim.
Ken, back to you.
Yes, yeah.
A lot of cruelty in this world.
There is.
I will now call the Budget Committee to order and turn it over to Mr. Peter. Mr. Peter?
Thank you very much. Michael Peter again from the Administration Division. And I am here purely to share the good news of how we have done through the second quarter, even though we're approaching well into the third quarter here. It's been a fantastic year from a financial standpoint, from an activity standpoint. You had previously approved a budget revision that recognized that, and we'll show you some of the details here in this presentation. As I have in the past, I'd like to acknowledge our budget team sitting in the gallery behind us, Tanya Mills and Nicole Varnes. They're two people, but they work like 20 and always make sure that we have the correct information. So that being said, I've also been given the con, so I will go forward. Information item number 1, second quarter budget review for the general fund. This again is really for information to show you where we are as far as the general fund is concerned. We would expect at this point in time from a revenue standpoint to not have much in the way of revenue, since that's really just focused on RecPac. That revenue does not affect the expenditure. What affects the expenditure is, of course, the enrollment in RecPac. We are projecting as we move through the rest of this year that we will fully expend all of our general fund revenue. We've talked previously about some of the challenges that we have with keeping up with forestry and some of the other things that we've had to forego in order to be able to stay within budget, and we'll continue working in that direction. Fund 8000, the revenue and operating fund. This is a fun one to talk about here. So you can get a sense here, of course, as of the end of the second quarter or half of the year, how we were doing. This is ahead of what our expectations would be. We'll talk about that in just a second when we look at our usual revenue and expenditure bar graphs here. But you can see that rec centers, that's primarily going to be focused on spending, getting ready for all of our classes, of course, and getting ready for summer camp. As we move through, because we're expending, we're encumbering, we're getting ready for that. You can see our rec activities, which includes our lakefronts. That's in a positive position at this point. RMD is right where we would expect them to be. Golf, we talked to Ryan, has banner days just about every day, even when it's cold outside. You can see here that continued through the first half of the year. We've had a little bit of bumpy weather, but certainly every time the sun's shining, we have people out. And then the administration associated with that as well. So just so we can compare here a little bit, we're talking about the first quarter and the second quarter. These are our revenue trends. And you can see that we were ahead of the game in the first quarter and slightly behind the game in the second quarter compared to last year. But we're expecting, of course, to see these continue to improve as we go with actual revenue here. The difference is essentially in the first quarter, we opened our summer camp, in the third quarter, we opened our summer camp registration in January, and you'll see that in the third quarter. And then here in the first quarter and the second quarter, that reflects primarily golf, of course, revenue and our class revenue up until that point. And the first quarter gets adjusted a little bit based on our expectations for how much from an accounting perspective we were accruing or deferring, and you'll see that go up and down a little bit there. So you will see this third quarter go through the roof in the next presentation when we come back.
Mike, before you move on,
Yes.
you go back to the one slide. So what are the two, so first and second quarters we got so far, what do they look like this year versus last?
Could you repeat that question?
What do the first and second quarter of this year look like versus last year? Where are we in total? I mean, I know we're ahead in the first quarter, behind in the second. What's the overall position?
In total, we are at, as of, let me just see here. We have the revenue here. We're at $22 million as far as the first and second quarter together are concerned as of this year. And we were slightly ahead of that in the first and second quarter as of last year as well. But our projections, even our conservative projections, are trending towards having net revenue to continue investing back in our revenue stabilization and our revenue sinking fund as well. Expenditures really match overall what our expectations were. Again, you can see some higher expenditures We could already see, based on how strong summer camp was last year, last fiscal year, and of course into the first quarter of this fiscal year, that we were spending because we had the participants. We were very close to capacity across the board, and we need to keep things going. So you can see from an operating standpoint how it compares. And again, we're expecting to be under our original, actually will be better than our original net revenue projections are concerned, but you can see again what these comparisons look like. So our net revenue, this is the one that I always like to show. You can see that the net revenue for the first quarter of FY22 was better than last year, or excuse me, was a little worse than last year because of the expenditures that were rolled into the beginning and some of those adjustments with revenue. And we will continue to see those get better and better as we go along. Last year was a little bit of an anomaly just in terms of where we were in FY21, continuing to save as much as we could because we just weren't sure what was happening as far as capacity is concerned. But we don't have those governors on capacity this year. So you can see overall that, as I said, revenue as of FY22, halfway through the year was at about almost 24 million. It's about 22 million right now, but our projections are going in the right direction. You can see also that our actuals here, because that also includes expenditures, transfers, things that we had to do in order to be able to plan for the whole year. We wanted to be able to encumber as soon as we could and make sure that we were planning appropriately so we didn't hold up any of our vendors, or make sure that all of our camps and classes could go as appropriate. I'd also like to say here that just to remind everyone, and I brought this up on my phone, that when we talk about the third quarter, remember that in just our first day, when we opened up our registrations for summer camp on January 11th, we were up 69% over the previous year. We had 17,700 plus registrations, $5 million in just one day, and then another $200,000 for spring break camps. We had over 6,000 unique participants register. That was up 88%. And in that brief amount of time, we filled 57% of our available spaces. So we're going in the right direction, continuing to invest and continuing to do what we can to offer the greatest programs around. So any questions?
Mike, Tim Hackman. Will during our third quarter review, our budget figures will potentially be adjusted by the county, and then we'll have an opportunity to take another look also in respect of that, correct?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Hackman, we will show those adjustments, show those projections as well, what the end of the year will look like, and have a conversation about what we expect to happen, what we need to adjust in the budget now, and what will sort of come together in the fund performance by the end of the year.
Other questions? Okay, we like good news, Mike.
Thank you.
There's no other questions. I will adjourn the budget committee.
Yeah, okay.
We're not
Wait,
adjourned
no, there-
yet, Ken. There's
Ken,
one
there's-
more agenda item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Flu's affecting my brain. Okay, sorry about that.
We haven't talked about CIP much, so.
This one over. Thank you. So hello, Michael Peter, Administration Division Director. As part of our conversation on the 22nd, when we had our colleague from DMB here, we started a discussion on the CIP and agreed that we would continue that discussion tonight. So just to refresh memories and set the stage, if you remember, there was a lot of talk about the $150 million that we had not spent yet. And you've seen a version of this before. We update this regularly, but this is just to show that, every bit of that $150 million is spoken for, but just in these few projects, you can see they total up to $134 million. And those were pieced together between money that was expended, but was part of the 2012 bond, 2016 bond, and of course, the 2020 bond as well. So this is just, again, to set that stage so we can continue to correct any misconceptions out there. One of the things that we were just talking about with, for instance, Audrey Moore and the different projects that we had agreed, the Park Authority Board voted on to approve us reallocating to Mount Vernon. Since we have that ARPA fund that allowed us to invest $25 million into Mount Vernon Rec Center, then those funds that were going to be tied up are coming back into our bond authority. And we were originally projecting, because of the cash flow issues, to expend those at the end of the cycle, which is up to 10 years after the bond is approved. What we talked about when Jay presented this to the Planning Commission, we talked about, really in ideal terms, following along with our discussion about what we're doing with rec centers and other facilities. Ideally, this is what we would really, from a staff perspective, like to see, that we are able to finish Mount Vernon, of course, and exceed our allocation, our projected allocation, by some significant amounts, to be able to spend that down before we even get to the 2026 bond and spending that. There are so many things. You can see the bright or the aqua blue in the middle. That's Mount Vernon. Those are those major projects. And you see the rest of those bars smaller and smaller. We still have to invest in the needs throughout the rest of the system. So Sarah, I think you wanted to take it.
Sure. So as Mike mentioned, we continue to communicate our position, our need. And last week, Jay had the opportunity to present to the Planning Commission about what our needs were, where we were with the CIP, where we are with the 26 bond. And again, she went over how we came up with the $209.5 million need for the CIP. And then next slide. Went through the different categories as staff are recommending. We know that this is a long process. Clearly, these categories may change, and the amounts in these categories may change based on what projects the board decides to put in the bond. But this was the high level recommendation that was requested by DMB. She shared this with the Planning Commission as well. And then next slide, we really tried to put a point on what does 29 million mean to us? You know, for schools, it might not be, you know, it's not a full renovation of a school, but for us, it's very meaningful. It's one of the rec center renovations. It could mean 100 playgrounds that don't get replaced. It's 10 park renovations that don't happen. It's 20 synthetic turf fields that don't get converted. It's 300 new picnic shelters that don't get built. So we're really trying to convey the message of, yeah, it doesn't sound like a huge decrease. And yes, you're getting more than 150, but 30 million to us is a huge impact, and it's a huge impact to the community. And so that message was relayed again last week to the Planning Commission. And we know that, you know, they're advocating for us, and they're advocating to consider the cash flow, as Mike mentioned, but also what we really need to be able to take care of the rec centers. We would like to be able to renovate Lee, Providence, and Audrey Moore. But if the bond is decreased, we'll need to make some difficult decisions about whether or not we renovate rec centers, or whether or not we take funding off some of the other areas in the bond. As we've discussed in the past, PROSA really is going to help guide the 26 project development for the bond. And so I believe the PROSA study will be complete this summer. And so we'll start having discussions in the fall about where we've identified gaps and where we need to prioritize projects for the 26 bond. And we'll begin those conversations with you then. Slide. And so just reiterating, these are the next steps related to the CIP. You know, it's a long way to the 2026 bond. And there's some work that we need to do internally with PROSA so that we can better inform the decisions that we're making for the bond when it's time. That discussion? Questions?
Questions,
I
comments?
made a statement at the last meeting about it's just status quo. It's not an increase. And I want to ask and make sure that everybody agrees with me on that. For the last 3 bond cycles, we've gotten $100 million, right? So that's 12 years.
100, before that it was 94.7, and before that, I think it was 66.
68.
68, yeah.
I think it
Didn't
is.
we get 100 twice?
No,
No,
Close,
it was
I
called
close.
100, but there was part of that went to the regional.
Yeah.
That was why it was the lower amount. was-
Right.
Okay,
they took a
but
piece.
just going to the 6 years, the 100 is just 150 is status quo.
Correct.
So we're really talking about round numbers, another 40. But considering the inflation, and we have some pretty good things to use as references of what things cost, mainly a rec center. That's cost went up about 30% or something like that. It's really status quo. It's not moving forward at all. It's not addressing these needs of the rec center and these other things. So am I thinking about that wrong?
I mean, status quo, yes, would be 150.
Status quo is not 150.
It's
though.
not 150 with inflation. You're
Right.
correct, right? So
And all those other years that we were creeping up a little bit, the inflation was a very manageable, almost flat thing.
On that point, wasn't DMB talking 180 when they were here?
Correct.
Last, so,
Right, so the
so,
30 million.
180 is the placeholder right now.
right, 180s, yeah, is the straw man figure. So we're talking about this 29 million, 29 and a half, or 29.8 million dollar gap, but you're right, still, I can understand your argument.
No, just so I understand, because what you had on here was over 200 million.
Yeah, 209.5 million.
That, so that you're saying it's a $29 million difference between the straw man and that, because I know you guys had come in originally with a number that was more than 209. You guys, that's a reduced number to begin with, right?
well, the project list is $1 billion,
No,
right?
right.
But we proposed 209.5 when we
Okay.
went to DMB. And then the budget advertisement is 180.
So, couple of questions. None of this matters if we don't solve the $25 million per year governor issue. We can get a bond for $1 billion. And if we can't get access to more than $25 million in any given year, it doesn't matter. Right now, what I heard them say at our last meeting was that there may be opportunities for it to go higher sometimes. But that's with the assumption that it might be lower other times. In other words, it might fluctuate around projects, but that 25 number was about where we were going to be sitting. So it would seem to me, and I have a series of questions. One, we have to figure out the $25 million question. Because unless that's solved, it doesn't matter what we, in fact, I would argue that asking for more than $150 million in bond money, when you can't get access to more than $25 million a year, means at the end of the 6 years, we're going to be yelled at for having not spent all our bond money, for having gotten too much bond money, and the public's going to be like, wait, I don't understand. We just gave you all this money. Why haven't you spent it all? I mean, it just sets us up.
It's simple math. That's assumed.
So
It has to get fixed.
well, I got the impression that right now, there's no anticipation of what I think you were putting here, which was a rise from 25 to 40-ish million. I mean, it fluctuated a little bit, went a little higher. And so my first question is, what are we doing to address the $25 million governor?
Well, and this is not going to be an answer for all of that, but the current projections are that they would bring us to 30, simply 180 divided by 6, but it still doesn't solve that issue that we have money to spend. That was an issue that was brought up by 3 or 4 of the different planning commissioners asking this question, and it sounds like there is some concern that's growing, not just here in the Park Authority Board, but also in the Planning Commission, that we can't do this. Like you said, it doesn't matter if we get $1 billion if we can't spend it. Now, we were directed by the Planning Commission and by the Board of Supervisors last year to both work on Mount Vernon, but also work with DMB on a long-term fix to this issue to figure out how we can raise and lower. As we said in the last meeting, we certainly can shake hands that we did, I think, great work to get to Mount Vernon. But we have not yet, other than identify what our needs are, we have not yet really started that hard work to figure out, how can we get some guarantees here? And that's really what we're focused on.
Raise and lower doesn't help us if we're still in the average. It may help us in a given year so that we aren't. It may help us in a given year if we have a $35 million renovation to a rec center. It doesn't help us if you take into account that means that entire year is nothing but rec center. And second, if they come back the next year, say we're now at 25.
Well, it all has to do with the bond capacity, bond carrying capacity of the county. And where we're getting really messed up is that they're floating about $460 million bond every 2 years for schools. And so that figures into the overall bond equation, and that's why we're getting squeezed.
Right.
At 25 million a year is just because of that. They
Mike,
didn't change cycles to 6 years. They're every 2 years.
To your point, conversations are happening. I've had a number with a couple of different planning commissioners. I think this is an important time for each of us to be talking to our supervisors and making sure they understand that issue very clearly. And then they can direct DMB to act.
Wait, so to that point, I've gotten pushback from some folks on the county side saying that we have gone multiple years without hitting our max capacity at 25. So,
and that's not incorrect. That's what we've explained. And I also, we went back into budget questions and answers and other documents from last year where we had the opportunity to explain that over the last several bond cycles, we were saving. It wasn't just design in one and then construction in another, but Mount Vernon is a perfect example. That feasibility started with 2008 and then built in terms of what we got to. And, we're not excusing it, we're explaining that we were in a different phase and now we have at least a major project every single bond cycle. So it's not a temporary problem to solve. And we know that we'll spend all of it if we're given that authority.
So, and just a reminder, it's not been 25 million every bond cycle. Over the last 8 years, it's gone from 13 to 14 to 18 or 19 to 25. So it has
Yes,
been
right, and our amounts haven't been $100 million every bond cycle, for the bond cycle either. So it hasn't had to be 25 when we were getting 68. But it would be, I think it would be helpful to be able to understand why I understand, oh wait, projects had to be built up and stuff. When we did that at Burke Lake with the driving range and the clubhouse. Because we knew with some of the construction project that was going to be done, it would be far more expensive to do one and then come back and do the other. It would be helpful to understand the thinking backwards looking, but perhaps more importantly, understand how we're going to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. Because going through this process and having this fight it's not even a fight, having this family discussion to try to figure out how we get from here to there. To go through it, it only takes 1 year of saying, oh, we did 20 million. When we could have done 25 or 30 million before it's not going to be, we're not going to be in a good place. So it would be helpful. We have to address the governor issue, and it would be helpful to explain how the decision-making process and the planning process is going to be changed to make sure we maximize whether it's 30 or 40 or whatever it is.
And really that will be dependent on what projects are included. So if we do Audrey Moore, but if we also do Providence and Lee, that's going to change the cash flow very different than it would if we did a lot of smaller projects, because we're going to need more cash in the years that we're doing those rec centers.
Right, but
which is similar to what's happening right now with Mount Vernon.
That changes the cash necessary as we get from from year 1 to year 6. That what I'm talking about is a process by which we can make sure that we're maximizing the use of the bond dollars we have access to. Whether it's because we're redoing Braddock and that year they're giving us 45 million instead of 30, whatever, however that works. Because already there's pushback of, you weren't able to do it in the past. Why are you complaining? Because what are you going to change? I'm just suggesting we need to address that question. So that in order to help us get where we want to be.
Okay, yes, we can do that.
Because I mean, I appreciate having the discussion about how we get to 200, 300, 400. To me, the governor's the only thing that matters. Because if the governor's at 35, then it's 35 times 6 is what we want. If the governor's 40, I want 40 times 6. But if the governor's 40, 40 times 8, 40 times 10 doesn't help us.
We can look at our structure, our process.
That's the pushback I've already gotten from some folks across the street.
And if I can just add to that, during the planning commission meeting, I think Jay went 9th or something. So we saw several of the other departments present, and they have specific projects, this fire station, that police station, this school, or what have you. And, part of this is going to really get to a point where we all need to be around that table as well to decide, okay, this is Audrey Moore instead of this fire station this year, and that fire station is next year. Right now, it's X divided by 6 and not necessarily considering just in the planning stages right now, we have to get something done. So we need to get those major facilities on the same.
And I'm all for holding her to the commitment she made sitting, I think right there, I don't think it's one of the other side. When she said that they would, that the opportunity to go up when we had big project thing was something they could work on, with the recognition that it was gonna have to be, we all have to, that if it's gonna be something on average, it may not be in year 2, but year 3 and 4 and 5, it may be below that, making up for the bubble up there. I mean,
I think that's why it's important for us to have a seat at the table with
I
the
agree.
countywide CIP planning
Right.
process. So we have our needs.
I agree.
Have we not had that seat previously?
No,
How do we make sure that we have it going forward? How do we know anything's gonna change?
I think that's part of the conversation that we're having with DMB is how do we change this? How do we improve the communication between DMB and us? How do we make sure that our needs are met and that we understand what the cash flow limitations are for the county and we can work within those? But, maybe there's some flexibility with what they're doing with public safety that allows us to do a rec center and spend 50 million one year. But those are the conversations that we need to have countywide so that we can plan.
Sarah, and following up on your comments that you just made, as well as the previous comments about all the projects that we're going to list, we do prioritize those, right? To what we need to do first, second, third, fourth.
Right,
we
so
can-
typically
we can
that.
present this to this group.
Yeah, yes, so typically the way the bond development process works is we bring $300 million worth of projects to the board and then you work through that. And then we bring back a work plan once the bond is approved about how we're going to move the projects through. And so I think it's through that work plan process that we prioritize and determine, what's going to go first and how that will fit in with the cash flow.
And I think it's important that folks out, because I think we often understand this built into what we're saying. I don't know that everybody, we all have to keep in mind to let other people know. The bond doesn't commit us to those projects.
Right.
We commit to buckets.
Right.
Because it's very possible that 2 years into a bond cycle, something significant happens and we have to change prioritization. So we do it based on, what is it, 6 buckets or whatever. It's new construction, land acquisition, renovation, the stuff. And so we will have a prioritized set of projects. But that list is subject to change and or reprioritization
Sure.
based on.
Just like what we did with Mount Vernon,
I know.
where we were going to take funding from other projects.
I'm just thinking that for the person that goes back and listens to this in a month, since this is now no longer minutes, that they don't, that, you know, we're not sitting in a meeting coming up with a list that we're stuck to for the next 6 years or 8 years or whatever.
We're stuck to the percentages, not the project.
It's a two-edged sword though, too, because
Why
we've
not?
got staffing issues. I mean, we can turn the governor on to spend 40 million. Now, do you have staff to
Right.
be able to consume $40 million? So it's more than just saying, give us more money.
So,
You gotta have the staffing to go along with it. It's not easy.
no, it.
Okay, Mike, obviously, we will be continuing this discussion. Hopefully in a positive manner. We've run out of time on this one, so thank you, Mike. The next item is 2026 bond funding. So I guess you're on for that too.
No, that
was
that's what
the-
we just did.
Huh? Oh,
We had a broader discussion on CIP.
oh, okay, you combined them. That flu's getting me.
Well, thank you for participating.
Yeah. Okay, if there are no other questions before the,
I just
there are.
at some point, I don't know if the right words are talking, but I can't speak for anybody else sitting around this table. I need to be empowered with more information to be able to have smart conversations with some folks about this. So I would just encourage folks to.
Yeah, that's been asked of and will happen.
Okay.
Yeah, the more we know, the better. If there are no other comments or questions,
Ken,
one more, okay, go ahead, Jim.
following up on the comment on PROSA and your presentation. I think what I heard was that this body might be addressing staff recommendations in the fall. Is that what I heard?
Can you bring up the timeline? I think the results of PROSA are due in the fall, and then we would start conversations after that.
Thank you.
And I don't recall when we met with the board. Was that last fall or was it earlier? than that?
September.
Okay.
No, but you need to go back further than this. This is CIP, right? Process.
This is it. This includes.
Yeah, this
PROSA.
includes it. Yeah, we'll expect the PROSA results in summer. And then we'll be working through we'll be reviewing our recommendations and developing that draft list of needs over the next year. And then the year after that, really working through public outreach and then working through PAB project prioritization. Everything really has to be finalized as far as the buckets are concerned by February of 2026. And I know that seems like a long time away, but yeah, we develop whatever that number is going to be and then, work towards that. So this is just the overall sketched out schedule at this point.
Any other questions?
Let me follow up. When is it anticipated that we would have any funds to deal with capital projects to implement PROSA?
Our focus is that PROSA will be the guiding planning factor for the 2026 bond projects.
Wow.
27.
Yeah, so yeah, beginning in
January 27th.
January 27th.
Memory check again. I thought that at one point in time, there would be the opportunity, once we sorted out this fall, went back to the board and I guess ran it through the executive's office, that there might be funds advanced to implement.
So we have 2 million,
Yeah, we have-
2.3 million available
Yeah.
from ARPA funds for equity work.
Okay,
So-
the number I remember was like, and that equity work is implementation of actual improvements.
Correct.
One,
I'm actually very concerned about that. Don't know what quite to do with it, but we've had this discussion about. And I think our analysis when it comes forward will show that we've got major issues with regard to equity. And what I'm hearing is maybe we can do something about that 4 years from now.
So to clarify, every project that we're looking at with an equity lens. So the money that we're spending from general fund sinking fund, the general fund money that we receive every year, any net revenue that we have in the revenue fund, all of our projects are prioritized considering equity with them. So the existing funding that we have, there's no dedicated funding just to address capital needs related to equity, but our approach is always to address equity as part of any capital improvements that we're doing. So we may look at needing to renovate 20 playgrounds, and we would prioritize the playground that is in an equity area. If all other factors were the same. So if there were significant safety issues somewhere, we probably would renovate that playground first. But we're prioritizing playgrounds that need to be replaced in opportunity areas in the county. So, and that's with the existing funds that we have available.
Okay, I guess I would just encourage somehow increasing the amount of the allocation, because I hear what you're saying with regard to allocating the funds that we have to facilities that we have and prioritizing maybe equity areas. That doesn't give us anything to do something new in a new location if we've got a void with regard to the services we're providing in that equity area. So I'm concerned about that.
One thing I think, listen, what I heard of the presentation at our last meeting, and what I've heard since then, there's limited dollars this year, and they're expecting next fiscal year to be worse than this. They do not expect next fiscal year, after the one we go through, to be a good fiscal year from a funding perspective. On top of which, to Bill's point, if we're looking at stuff in the bond, I don't want to be the person who builds a rec center and can't staff it. I remember reading about the building a facility that then couldn't be staffed. We have to take into account the fact that some changes then require general fund changes. And I think that those are going to be discussions that we also are going to have as we're looking at you don't build a new rec center without then staffing the rec center. So it's like, hey, here it's coming online now. Does everybody understand we got to put people there? But when we're looking at new project, I think it's going to be, I think we're going to have a couple years where it's going to be tough to find lots of money for anything that's big and new, and then it's going to be on the bond, and it's going to deal with.
Yeah, well, even looking at the equity items, where we're at in terms of land acquisition, if we got an opportunity to buy a piece of land, to put a playground there, we got $3 million for the next 4 years, and that doesn't buy you anything. So the conversations I've been having with, we need to find some kind of sinking fund or some kind of advancement that you can kind of put to the side, that when we get opportunities, we can draw off of that and then figure out on the back end how we pay you back or equalize that. But I mean, that's my biggest concern. We don't have land acquisition money at all.
And I do think that PROSA can inform future general fund budget requests. So once we have that data, that doesn't mean that we can't ask for additional funding as we do for ADA and other capital improvements through our general fund requests as well.
Following up on that, I guess I had in my mind that we would be meeting with the board again, perhaps in September, with enough information to get additional funding. And it appears we're not on that track. Is that correct?
What there are two different tracks that are happening. The PROSA track in terms of being able to plan appropriately and invest in opportunity areas. And then there's the equity consultation that's going on, which is looking at our revenue fund model, how we can adjust that or propose adjustments to how we're funded with a combination of user fees and general fund, and potentially ask for additional general fund investment to make the fee-bearing part of our system more accessible. And that's the expectation that our contractor will present to the Park Authority Board here. And then as part of that joint meeting, that will be the big follow-up with the board members on that piece of it.
Just one other comment. As following up on it, it appears we're not going to be in a position where we can acquire land and build facilities in proximity to what we identify the needs are going to be. So should we be thinking about moving folks from the equity area in terms of they're not having the opportunities there to opportunities? Meaning like a bookmobile, we do the reverse, we take the books there. So is there, what I would like is, and I think I mentioned this before, and I think the staff is looking at it, but for us to look at what we can do in the next 3 or 4 years, well, beginning sooner rather than later, but happening throughout the next 3 or 4 years until we might be in a position where we've got capital and ability to acquire land and build facilities. So if the staff would continue to look at that or look at that, I'd appreciate it.
That's one of the things that got pulled out of the original proposal, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was, to your,
Jim gives an excellent argument for that.
yeah, there were 2 mobile nature centers put in our proposed budget that the county decided not to fund, and the kind of idea behind those was exactly that.
But we're looking at grants and then the foundation to help secure either vehicles or money for vehicles.
But unless we get some additional fund from the county, at some point, you're just rearranging the deck chairs. So if you want to do something in the space you're talking about, what are we not doing? That becomes the question.
And as we've seen, we have other things that sometimes we don't have choices about, like trees.
Right.
That just take dollars that you have to do. That, you know, just eliminate a deck chair.
Okay, with that,
We need a jury.
I think that obviously, Mike, we're going to need some more follow-up on this discussion and more information. Again, the more we know, the better. So we can discuss it rationally with our supervisors and others who inquire. So at this point, in the interest of time and dinner, I would like to adjourn the excuse me, the budget committee.
Thank you, Ken.
Welcome.
Item is the Planning and Development Division Quarterly Project Status Report as presented to the Planning and Development Committee on February 22nd, 2023. Information item number 2 is the Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Access, or PROSA Strategy Project Update as presented to the Planning and Development Committee on February 22nd, 2023. And information item number 3 is the FY 2024 budget, proposed budget as presented to the Budget Committee on February 22nd, 2023. Chairman's matters this evening, I will keep it very brief. Just want to remind people that this coming Tuesday, March 14th at 7 p.m., we will hold virtually the Federation of Friends meetings. Encourage anyone who can to attend. We'll provide an update on the process strategy and we'll present on the FY 2024 budget to the Friends groups, and then we'll hear information from them, any updates they have. If you don't have the link already and are interested in attending, I'm sure Allison can send it to you. And then the only other item I've got is just again reinforced on the budget this cycle. Thank the members who did sign up to testify. We're gonna have a good crew this year for the public hearings. And if you haven't already done so, and some of you have, so thank you, but please, please, please schedule meetings with your supervisor to get questions or requests earlier that Mike made. There will be talking points provided. And we can always tailor them for your discussion if need be. Just let us know what you need. That's all I have. So we'll turn over to Sarah for Director's Matters.
Thank you. Allison, a second to get the slides up. The first one is just an acknowledgement of an award the Park Authority and Jay recently received from Moore. Moore is one of our partners that has worked to help us build and maintain trails throughout the county for many, many years. And the Park Authority and Jay were recognized as the Land Manager of the Year during their recent award ceremony. And I think Brendan accepted on our behalf. So thank you for doing that. Next slide. And then this is a great story to share. If you all, I think, received the Parks and Rec magazine last month. And one of our staff members, Luca Tui, was recognized as one of the under 30 staff in the nation that are helping to move up park and recreation agencies forward. Luca, I believe, is 20, just turned 20. He's worked for the Park Authority for 3 or 4 years. He started at the water mine where he was helping with recruitment of staff there. And then during COVID, he moved up to our HR department and really has spearheaded one of the biggest challenges we have as an organization around recruiting staff. So if you see Facebook posts or advertisements, Luca is behind all of that. He's behind, us going to high schools and setting up tables to try to recruit staff, and really has just brought fresh ideas to the HR team and how we can recruit and maintain our staff. So hats off to Luca. He's a great staff member, great contributor to the organization, and we're very proud that he was recognized by NRPA. Next slide. Just wanted to share with you that the day after Lee District was officially renamed to Franconia District, the signage was changed, not only on the rec center, but at the front of the park. Lehigh Park, that signage had changed earlier, but just wanted to let you know that the signage is up and rec center looks good. Next slide. And we have, I think, mentioned this in the past, but every year the county recognizes employees who have served the county for 10 or more years. And at the last length of service recognition, 54 members of the Park Authority staff were recognized. Their years of service totaled almost 1,925 years of service. And this is Jay at a recognition ceremony that we had at Audrey Moore for Joe Jackson. Joe has been custodian at Audrey Moore. And if you've ever been to Audrey Moore, you know Joe because he's there. He's a staple. Everybody knows him there. And we wanted to do a special recognition for him because of the contributions that he's made to the Park Authority and the county. And he is just a really special individual that many of the customers at Audrey Moore know and have grown to love over the years. So we have a lot of dedicated staff. Although we've had a lot of retirements over the last couple of years, we do have a lot of staff that have significant tenure with the county and with the Park Authority. And then we've talked a lot about the closing of Mount Vernon and the changes that impacted to customers. But one of the exciting things that we just were able to negotiate, Cindy and her team have been working with the St. James Sports Complex so that we can provide skating lessons at St. James. So we have a lease agreement with St. James to offer skating. It's something that they haven't been able to provide within the expertise that they have. So they're excited about the partnership. And so this kind of builds off the conversation that we had last week about other conversations that we're having with St. James about other partnerships. So excited to see that get off the ground. Cindy, I think probably in the next month, we'll start offering classes at St. James. Awesome. All right, next slide. And then another exciting thing, we're all very excited to have the opening for Patriot Park North next month. And it's already a very, very popular facility. If you haven't visited yet, you should. It's amazing, beautiful facility. Last week we toured it with a couple of tournament organizers and they were just blown away by the amenities that were available there. And so was Major League Baseball. This is something that we've been working on for the past couple of months, but we've just confirmed that Major League Baseball will be holding a home run derby type event at Patriot. And major league players, probably retired major league players, will be in attendance. This is a kind of a pilot event for them. If it works here, they're planning on replicating it around the country, but we're excited to have the first one at Patriot. I think that's it.
All right. Tim, anything from you?
Chairman, I'll pass.
Okay, Jim?
Yes.
Michael? Yes. Linwood?
Pass.
I will. Bill?
Just one thing.
He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it.
I could, but Jim caused this. When he talked about, taking parks to vulnerable areas, right? With the mobile vans or what we're doing, we're actually gonna finalize the approval of that with the Reston Community Center in a public hearing that we're having on Monday night. And we're actually gonna buy 2 vans to take the community center activities out to the overall general Reston community. So it's a great idea. And with that, I pass.
All right. Ken?
I pass.
Abuna?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to mention that I met Janae and Luca at our career fair yesterday. The School of Sport, Recreation and Tourism Management at George Mason University had a career fair, and they were both there representing the Park Authority. And they did an amazing job interacting with students and hopefully creating some opportunities and partnerships with the students. So I wanted to give them a shout.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Dr. Carter?
Pass.
All right. We're going to close, right? Got anything else before we do that? All right. Dr. Carter, I'll back to you with a motion to bring us into closed session.
This is Cynthia Jacobs Carter, and I move the Park Authority Board recess and convene in closed session for discussion and consideration of matters enumerated in Virginia Code 2.2-3711 and listed in the agenda for this meeting as follows: consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating for litigating posture of the public body pursuant to Virginia Code 2.23711A7.
I second.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? All right. We are now in closed session for approximately 10 minutes. We're recording again and we're okay. Dr. Carter, off to you.
This is Cynthia Jacobs Carter, and I move the Park Authority Board return to open session.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Or, yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and call for certification of topics discussed in closed session.
This is Cynthia Jacobs Carter, and I move the Park Authority Board certify that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Virginia Code 2.2-3711, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the board.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carried. We there are no actions taken in closed session, so we don't need to make any motions. Is there any other business to come before us this evening? Okay, with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. See you guys in 2 weeks.
Night.
All right.
Amen. Mr. Chairman, I will not be here in 2 weeks.
Not acceptable, Bill.